light here. All right, welcome to the live stream today. I'm going to be answering some questions about cattle ranching, some of the common questions that people have. And if you have any questions about ranching or cattle raising in the United States, public land issues, how just even basic like ranch terminology, anything like that, make sure you go to in the chat here and just leave a comment or a question. I probably won't get to all of them, but I will try my best to get to all of them. So, or to some of them at least. I'm sorry, I'm probably not going to try to get to all of them because I will lose some in the feed, but I'll do my best. So one of the first difficult answers or questions that people ask that has a difficult answer is, what's the difference between cattle ranching and farming? So that's what we're going to start with, but we're going to go through just a little bit of background. We're going to wait for some people to get on. I'm going to welcome people this morning from everywhere around the country, hopefully, and then we'll get started. So somebody said good morning. I better bring up my chat over here so I can get it right. And welcome everybody this morning. I'm just so everybody knows, I live in Montana, and I live in a small town up here. It's definitely, and we'll get into this in the ranching questions, but there's a lot of differences between living in a rural western state with ranching, and the difference between that and doing ranching in like Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, somewhere in there is completely different. And we'll kind of cover some of those differences as we go here this morning. So good morning to you. So this morning is going to be about answering ranching questions, anything to do with ranching. Usually something, if you have a question that's a simple ranching question or something that you just want to understand about ranching, make sure you put that in the chat. I would love to try to get to some of your questions today. I have a list of questions here, so I'm going to go through some of them. We're going to start with the difference between ranching and farming. That's one of the things we're going to get into today. Let me go to my chat here so I can make sure that I'm getting your questions. There we go. Now we got it. Hopefully if you guys are getting feedback, let me know, like a double. Just make sure we're not putting any volume in there from a different device. Good morning from Idaho. All right. How do you go on vacation? Does it cost a lot extra to pay for people to take care of your place? That is a very good question. So we're going to get into some of these questions right away. I apologize for the quality of the stream. Usually, I would love for this to be like a fantastic quality camera shot, and I try, but the problem is I don't have an internet connection. Even with Starlink. Starlink does great, but it just doesn't do very well with live streams. It doesn't, because of the latency or the intermittentness of satellite. It doesn't pick this up extremely well for a live stream. So I basically have to do it on my phone, and that makes it more difficult. But hopefully you can hear me and you can see me okay, and that's what matters, right? All right. All right, let's make sure that I get these all ready to go here. Okay, I think I got everything lined up. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I know there's not a huge amount on here, but amount of people yet, but we're just going to go ahead and get started answering these questions. I'm going to start with the one that Jack asked, because I'm going to go into the difference between farming and ranching, which is a difficult question. But I'm going to answer this one first. This is what Jack asked. He says, how do you go on vacation, and does it cost a lot extra to pay for people to take care of your place? So I am, and I want to start by being very honest. I am currently not a rancher. So this is not something that I do every single day. What I do is create videos, live streams, and products that promote ranching. That's my job. Okay. I have been in the tourism. I've raised horses. I've raised hay. So growing up, I was raising hay and managing a horse leasing company for 20 years. And during that time period, did everything in ag, work cows. I helped ranchers all the time, worked a ton with horses, and not just a few horses, like 180 horses at a time. It was just lots of horses. Land. So you deal with tourism, you deal with the hunters, you deal with the ranchers, how the land is taken care of, how people use public land is kind of in the forefront of your mind all the time. Besides the fact that we raised all the hay for our horses, so that was hundreds of tons of hay, and we put up all small squares for most of the time that I was managing that. So small squares are like 80-pound bales where you have to put most of it up. We have to feed it all by hand, that kind of thing. So what I do, you have to keep in mind that to be able to do what I do, you can't really ranch. His question is about ranchers going on vacation. If you have animals, every animal you have, even a dog, makes vacation harder. So you can imagine if you have 300 cows and fences down, and there's a law in place, even with horses, that when you get more than 50 miles away from your place of residence, the animals will get out of the fence that they're in. This is not a law on the books. This is a Murphy's Law. I was used to say, as soon as I get 50 miles away, the sheriff calls and says, hey, there's some horses out on the railroad tracks. It's like, oh, shoot. And there's nothing you can do about it. So vacations are very difficult for people in ranching, extremely difficult. When you talk to people who've ranched all their lives, generations, you really only get to take vacations without your kids, because your kids take care of the place while you are on vacation, if your kids are still there. If you don't have kids there, you have a hired hand. Now, hired hands are never as good as the owner or a kid, because I wouldn't say never, almost never. And the reason is they get paid to be there to work. They don't get paid if everything goes right. That's what a rancher's looking at. He's like, if anything goes wrong, right, it costs me. But a ranch hand is like, as long as I do my job, I get paid. So it's never quite to that level, So a rancher always feels like trepidation leaving it in the hands of your ranch hand. You're like, oh man, he broke that thing last week. Is he going to make sure to get this calf fed? Is he going to make sure that thing doesn't break down? That tractor's been tricky on, whatever it is. So it's so difficult for ranchers to go on vacation. So typically they don't. I mean, my wife grew up on a cattle ranch, and it's farm and cattle ranch, about half and half. And that, they just didn't go on vacation. I mean, and they had 3 brothers, so they probably could have switched off and gone on vacation, but that it's just difficult. When you have animals, especially that many animals, if you want this lifestyle, you're saying, I don't want to vacation very much. Let's just say that. And part of it, I mean, people take vacation to do ranching. I mean, that's like guest ranches and things like that are part of that world. So in a way, people think, well, you are vacationing all the time, but the stress and the worry and everything is so there in your face all the time. I can't describe to you how stressful it is, how stressful it was for me managing that company for that long. My dad still has it. He still owns Big Sky Horse Leasing. That's why I'm able to do a bunch of stuff over there. I'm able to do a bunch of stuff over there now because I don't work there, so I don't have to rely on it for money. So now I don't make money. Have a very difficult time making money. But anyway, it's not the same stress as there every day. Like, is something going to break down? Is this whole thing going to, you know, die on me? It's really tough. So vacations are you got to say goodbye to them. But I will say this, as a farmer rancher or somebody who's starting in farming and ranching, you need to make time to get away. I literally had my body in my 20s start breaking down. I was starting to have heart palpitations. I was waking up in the middle of the night wondering if I was going to die. My gallbladder went out, my appendix went out, and the doctor says you literally need to take a vacation. Your body is not handling the amount of stress, and it's breaking down. And this is in my 20s. So but I mean, at the time, my dad had a horrible head injury. He still does, but he's able to function now. Back then, he wasn't able to function in a capacity where he could do anything with us. So all that responsibility in my 20s was on me. And so I took a vacation. And when I took a vacation, literally, that healed my body to take a vacation. I took 1 week vacation, went to Arizona with my in-laws. You wouldn't think that would be a vacation, but it was. And just that being away from the place where you weren't taking all that responsibility on you healed my body right up. Heart palpitations and everything just went away. So it is good to get away from that. It's good to get away from it if you can. It's just very, very difficult in that situation. So difficult to get away from it because you have to have somebody take care of everything while you're gone. Luckily, I had my mom was able to do a lot of it, and we had a couple of ranch buddies who were able to help out back then. So anyway, that is the vacation question. So let's go through, just make sure we're not missing anything, and then I'll start going through my list here too. All right. Oh, here's a good question from Lonnie. From Lonnie. Do you think the new administration will be good for ranchers? So this is an interesting question because I do a lot of videos with people that are on the other. I'm very conservative for a lot of reasons, not just agriculture reasons. There's a lot of people I do business or I do videos with that are not conservative, and a lot of it has to do with the business aspect of ranching. And a lot of people put the fact that true what is it, capitalism is the big corporate model has been kind of put in place over the years. So I will say that over the last 10-15 years, a lot of presidents and administrations on both sides have been detrimental to the ranching industry, the farming and ranching industry. And making a bigger farm bill or any farm bill at all does not make farming and ranching better. All we are doing is subsidizing the people who charge us more money. So what I mean by that is you have the massive corporations. The going global is the enemy of farming and ranching. That it is, because corporate farming and ranching, which is what we've done with our entire hog market. We've gone from 600,000 hog farms down to 6,000. We've gone from the chicken farms. Chicken farms are down 90% in the last 40 years. And the beef industry is down amazingly too. Centralizing these businesses is putting all the small people out of business and putting large corporations into business. That is not healthy for land or for the industry. And I'll tell you why, because the industry, the larger you get, the harder it is to manage small pieces of property wisely. When you have a bunch of people in a boardroom deciding what to do as a business, it all comes down to the bottom line. How are you going to make more money? It has nothing to do with should we improve soil health on this 760 acre hay ground. It has nothing to do with that. It doesn't, they don't see it. They don't care about it. It has to do with the bottom line. And when you get to that point, globalization of these industries, of our food industries at the base level, the farm and ranch, you start destroying everything, the very fabric of it. That's my belief. So take that however you want to. I feel so getting back to this administration has a couple things that are going to be extremely helpful to the agriculture industry. Number one, tariffs. So the agriculture industry in the United States, and I probably should leave that to later, but so Pete is talking about, so somebody remind me about tariffs, but I think that the administration is going to do a few things that are really, really good for American ag. We've had administrations in the past, and not just the previous one with Biden, but before that even, where globalization was the goal. It's like we have to be big enough to compete with the world, and what happens is we end up with all other countries being able to outcompete us. It doesn't work. Free trade is not really free. It just means that you get screwed by everybody and you can't compete because we have laws that make us pay a certain amount of wages. We have to keep up with regulations that are nowhere near or way more stringent than other countries, and it puts us at a disadvantage, even if our product is better. So that's a tough one. I think this administration will really help farming and ranching because hopefully, especially with RFK in there, the incentives need to be on growing to improving soil health, improving the quality of our food for our citizens, to keep our citizens healthy, not just how much can you produce of this exact crop that we've been growing for the last 50 years, and we're not going to change, and we're all going to funnel all the money up to the big, humongous corporate players that are world, global companies. That has been what we picture as, oh, we're going to help farming by, $40 billion farm bill. And don't quote me on the numbers, but most of the farm bill, like 80% of the farm bill, actually just goes directly to food stamps. It doesn't help farmers at all. It's not doing anything for farmers. So even if you did subsidize directly all that money to farmers, you're still not helping farmers. You're just paying them to do the same thing. You need to incentivize them to do things that are good for the long term, to keep our soils healthy, to keep our food safe, to grow crops that we may actually need, not just here, grow the same thing we grew for World War II, and we're going to pay you if you don't make any money. That doesn't help. You have to actually fix the system, not just throw money at it. So I went on a rant there. Okay, let's answer this. Okay, what hats do I wear? Cliff said, what hats do I wear? This is the last question. Then I'm going to get to from here, and then I'm going to go to a few questions over here. Then I'll come back to questions in the chat. What hats do I wear? So this right here is a resistol. Now, I like this hat. I like the way it feels. I like the way it fits. The one major problem, and I excuse my hair. I haven't had a haircut in a long time here. I have one scheduled, but this inner band, this sweatband, has just literally melted. It's just goo. That's terrible. I don't know why that happened, but I contacted them about it, and apparently that didn't help. So I definitely can't say, here, buy this hat. I had an MHT before that. So I'm a person who doesn't wear expensive hats. One time I bought a really expensive hat, and it was custom fit. It was too tight. So I like my hats a little bit looser. I actually I shape them like this because I like this look, right, with the little higher back. But I do that partly because it sits lower on my head. I can push it down to where it just touches my ears and hooks the knowledge bump or egghead thing that you got going on, whatever you want to call it. And that helps me keep it on my head in the wind and all that stuff. If you have a hat that doesn't, then it sits up here like this, and you have a bump. Everybody's got a bump in the back of their head right here. And if it's not down past that bump, you get a little breeze in Montana, I'm talking, 20 miles an hour, your hat's going to fly off, and that's going to spook your horse, and you have to chase it across the prairie. That is no fun. So I I buy my hats not shaped like this. I just buy cheaper hats because I was on a story there. I bought a really expensive hat and it lasted about as long as the cheaper hats. So I just buy one that's somewhere between, usually they're between 80 and 120 bucks. I don't even go that fancy because I don't care. I'm not prideful like, hey, I spent 500 bucks on my hat. Like that makes any difference to me. No, I'm gonna make it look how I want. I've discovered that if you wear the crap out of them just like I do, they're gonna last the same amount of time whether you buy a $120 hat or a $500 hat. So my favorite so far that I've had is the MHT. I thought that one was I really liked that hat. I would like to do a deal with MHT, but they don't do affiliates or nothing like that. So all right, okay. So let's say somebody says love the rant. I got ranting earlier about some stuff. Okay, let's get into some questions about agriculture, farming and ranching. What is the difference between farming and ranching? Okay, so this is very interesting because there's a lot of people that say, like if you watch anything from Australia, like cattle farm, and you even hear that term here, cattle farm. You got farm and ranch. You got it's just and a lot of times people have in their mind like ranching is you get on a horse and you're riding across the prairie and or the mountains and moving cows and all that stuff, and that's ranching. And then farming is down in the bottom of lowland or whatever. So it's very difficult to tell the difference between a farm and a ranch. Let's say that. There's a few tests that you can do. We'll start with this, okay? If you have a whole bunch of knots in your lariat is a rope. Do I have one right here? No, it's over on my saddle. If you have a whole bunch of knots in your rope and you use it to tow things around with a vehicle, that is not a rancher. Okay. If a rancher grabs a lariat and uses it to pull something in equipment or tie something together in equipment, it would just hurt him to do that. It would really hurt me to grab a lariat, tie a bunch of knots in it, unless it was to tie around your saddle horn or wrap around the post of a horse trailer when you're getting a cow in there or something. That's different. But if you have grease on your lariat, that like hurts somebody. Anyway, that's one test. And that's just being funny, but typically what a farm and ranch, the difference between farm and ranch is a rancher is somebody who is mostly dealing with livestock. So they're dealing with cattle, they're dealing with sheep, whatever. And a lot of ranchers, it doesn't necessarily mean horses, because a lot of ranchers that I know just exclusively use, four-wheelers and side-by-sides. And it kind of depends on your territory. If you're on all flat ground, it's a lot easier to go jump on a four-wheeler than it is to saddle up a horse. So and farmers would be somebody who deal with mostly in the ground. They're dealing with growing crops. So they're growing corn, wheat, canola, whatever, lots of crops so if they're focused mainly on that, then they're typically what we designate as a farmer. Now, most of the time, especially in the past, it was always both. Farm and ranch was like the rancher grew crops and the farmer had cattle, and it was just both. And some people have an aptitude for one or the other. Some people really love to sit in a tractor all day and farm. They just love that. They love working with selling grain and figuring out how to do that, and what crop to grow, and they just like planting and growing things. And other people just want to deal with cattle. Or the animals. They just want to be there with the animals, and they want to, and it's in your blood, kind of. So, all right, let's go to the second one. How do you start a ranch? So this is such an amazingly difficult question. How do you start a ranch? I think there's no like one way fits all to start a ranch. It's not, but it's going to take capital to be any kind of size. So when you get started in ranching, you have to You have to have some land and to put your cattle on. That's the thing. Even if you just start with 10 acres, 10 acres of land to put a couple of cows on. Some people, if you want to start small, go buy 2 or 3 cows and start raising cattle. I mean, and it kind of depends on whether you're wanting to actually make money at this or not. So making money is a lot different than, hey, I just want to have the farm and ranch lifestyle, right? That's different than make your money somewhere else and just raise some cattle or something. From what I can tell, and I'm a cattle guy, I like cattle more than any of the other animals. From what I can tell, they're not the best moneymaker unless you're going to, because in the traditional sense. So here's the traditional way of making money with cattle. You have a cow, you breed her to a bull, which requires you to have a cow and a bull, at least one of each, right? And you breed those together and you get a calf after 9 months, right? Or 10 months. So you get 10 months, you get a calf. You can't really sell that calf. You have to wait at least another 8 months to get it to a point where you can wean it. You wean it off the cow and you have something to sell. But if you sell it at that point, you are just a commodity rancher. That's fine. You can be a commodity rancher. Most ranchers are commodity sellers. So what that means, they sell it on the commodity market. You either sell through a sale or to a buyer. You don't dictate that price at all. So if it's way down or if it's way up, the market, you just get whatever you get. That's it, right? That's commodity selling, and that's very risky. That's why farmers and ranchers have gone out of business. 17,000 of them every single year have gone out of business. We're losing ranchers, cattle ranchers, 17,000 a year since 1980. You figure the numbers, that's a lot of cattle ranchers that are going out of business, because when you're completely at the mercy of the commodity market, which means you're at the mercy of the massive global corporation system, what you end up with is they are big enough to take a hit. They're big enough to change some prices. They're big enough to work the market, and you're not. So guess who ends up losing? Back then, in 1970 something, the rancher got 60% of every dollar spent on the food that went. When somebody spent $1 at the supermarket or the butcher shop or whatever, 60% of that dollar went to the rancher, which means, and that's split between, I'm not talking just the rancher who raises the calf. I'm talking about the rancher who raises the calf, the person who takes it then, which is called backgrounding. They take the weanling calves and they go from there and they feed them until, usually on pasture, but sometimes in the feedlot, from weanling, which is 8 months old, to a year, right? Then they go to a feedlot and they're finished up before they're butchered. That entire thing got 60% of the dollar. So that was spread out over those 3 groups of people, right? Well, now today it's like 38%. So they're getting 38 cents of every dollar spread out amongst all those people. The rest of the money goes to the retailer and the packer, which is at the top. They used to get, 38%. Now they're getting like 62% or more. So no wonder we're having farmers and ranchers go out of business. That's the commodity market. Now, what some people have been doing when they're starting small, and this is what I would recommend, and not that I'm going to say, hey, if you fail, it's my fault. But what I see is people who are minded they have this in their mind when they start. I'm going to start a cattle ranch, and I'm going to go all the way from start to finish. That is a huge investment. That's why I'm saying cattle may not be the best way to start, because they take way longer to get there. They're more expensive and they take way longer. So if you have one cow die, that's a massive hit. Now, I mean, that's, $2,300 right down the drain. Boom. And whatever she would have produced as a calf. But if you can raise a calf and then you background it and you feed it up, which is more cost, and you have to take 26 to 30 some months before you get to the point where you can actually butcher and sell the meat. and then you have to market it and sell the meat to somebody, right? If you can do that, then you know what you're getting at the end. So you can sit down and figure on paper, here's what I'm going to do. Now, I wouldn't start by, hey, let's buy a cow and breed it, because then you're 3 years out before you ever see a paycheck. You know, maybe buy some fats that are pretty close to being butchered and butcher them and figure out how to sell that meat to the customer, and then work your way backward from there. So once you sell those fats, buy a couple yearlings and feed them up and butcher them and sell them, because that's really what it is. This is to me what people need to do in ranching. What they want to do is go buy a ranch, throw 300 cows on it, and buy 5 horses and go out there and ride, which doesn't make you any money. That's not the money maker. You have to figure out the business of ranching, which is why I created the game Cattle Kings, which is in development. It's live, but is trying to help people understand, here's what you start with. Here's how you go from this point to making money at that point. Because if you can't figure that out, if you can't figure out how to buy a cow, raise a calf, and sell it for a profit, you aren't in business. It doesn't matter how much it took to start. It just doesn't happen. So this is such a massive subject of how to start a ranch, because you can start with 3 cows. If you have somebody that has enough capital, you got a few $1,000,000, or you got an investor or something, then go buy a ranch, go get your cattle, and decide what you're going to be. If you're going to be a cow-calf operation, meaning if you're going to raise calves and then sell them on the open market, that's risky because you never know what the price is going to be. Or if you're going to sell to the end customer, then start there and work your way backward. Not start where you think, not start with Yellowstone and work your way forward. That doesn't work as well. Number 2, location is everything. So if you're starting in Montana, it's going to be a lot different than starting in Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, something like that. And we're going to get into that a little later. So I'm not really sure I answered that question. How do you get started in cattle ranching? There's so many ways to get started in cattle ranching. Here's what I would do right now. If you have $10,000 and you have 20 acres that produces enough, that you can have cows on it, right? Here's what I would do. If you only want to do cattle, and nothing else matters, you don't care if you make as much money, you want to do cattle, I would go buy some cattle that are almost ready to butcher. Feed them some corn or some grain that's been used for making, at a brewery or something. Feed them up, butcher them, and figure out how to market that beef to customers. That's what I would do. If you can figure out how to market to beef and make a profit, if you can buy a cow that's ready to be butchered, butcher it, sell it to a customer now, and you can make a profit, then you go with 3, then you go with 5. Now, if you can make a profit on 5, you can work your way backward, meaning don't buy a cow that's ready to be butchered, buy a yearling that's ready to be fed. Then you put that on your place and you feed it up until it's fat and 30 months old or under 30 months old, and then butcher it and sell it. Now, once you figure out how to make a profit at that, then you back up another step. If you want the full thing, or you're just like, well, I'll just do this. If I can make a profit at this, why wouldn't I just do this? So then you just grow yourself from there, because profit is the key. If you can't make a profit, you don't have a business, and you can't start a ranch if you don't have a profit. Now, I think there's more profit in other animals, more than cattle. I honestly do. It's just cattle are hard on fences. They're difficult to keep in. They eat a ton. They're way more loss if you lose one cow, right? Versus sheep or hogs. Now, you cannot make any money at sheep or hogs unless you're actually selling the meat, okay? If you go raise pigs and then you sell pigs at a sale, you're going to get, you'll lose money, or sheep, either one, because the markets are completely controlled globally and you can't make money at that. So unless you got 40,000 sheep or something, maybe. So what you do is, like with sheep or hogs, I mean, you got to think about this. A cow has 1 calf, okay? And you can sell that one calf every time. That's it. So and if one cow dies or one calf dies, you're out a massive chunk. Take a pig. You got one pig, you breed it twice a year, you get like six to eight babies, in each litter. So potentially you can have 20 pigs in 1 year. You feed them up to be, 300 pounds. That's an enormous amount of meat. Hogs are like mostly meat. They just are built that way. They just have a massive amount of meat versus the carcass versus what they eat. So you can have literally grow a 20 pig herd out of two sows, right, in 1 year. Now you butcher those and sell them for $1 a pound, you have actually made money. That's what I mean by cattle are not the end. I haven't raised hogs, so I've just done a ton of videos, and I learned so much from talking to these people. I'm like, I'm putting it together when I'm talking, when I'm doing these interviews. I'm like, so 20 pigs a year is way more meat than you could ever get from, for the cost of feeding that you could ever get out of one cow. I mean, it's just not going to happen. One cow, you're, total profit, total revenue, you're going to get $1,500 to $1,800 a year out of one calf, where, just think about one sow having 18 to 20 hogs a year at $1 a pound. Your revenue is like $6,000. You can't do that out of a cow. And if you lose one cow, you're done. So these are the kind of things I'm talking about. People like to see, oh man, it's so nice to be out there ranching and everything. Yes, maybe. If you already have the land, you already have everything, but you have to figure out how to make a profit. If you can't make a profit on one cow, it doesn't matter if you have 40 cows or 500 cows or 2,000 cows, you can't make a profit on them either. So the first thing you have to do to become a rancher is figure out how to make a profit at ranching. Do it on a small scale and then scale it. Now, you're going to have a big hurdle with land here, and we're going to talk about that. Hopefully, we'll get to that in a few minutes. So, all right. I'm going to come to a couple questions in here, a couple comments in here. Matt from 406 Regen, he's out in eastern Montana, or not eastern Montana, central Montana. Did a video with him. He's a fantastic guy. Trinity, profit and ranching don't belong in the same sentence. We do this for the lifestyle. Yes, and I hear that all the time. Okay, I do hear that all the time. And this is something that is going to actually be the case. If you step into ranching, that you've like inherited it, you're in a tough spot because, and in tough spot in a way, okay, you are blessed in a way because you just inherited land. So that is not something that everybody has the opportunity to do. So I can't say that that's a bad thing. But a lot of times you're put in a situation like, here's what we've done for 100 years or 40 years or, however long your family's had this place. Now you move on, but you don't have any capital. You can't, how do you change it? How do you change the whole operation to where it's actually profitable when you are stuck? When somebody's starting from zero, they usually have more opportunity because sometimes they come from a job where, they've got a little bit of money in the bank. They can kind of, search out that deal that they need to make. They can learn how to make a profit first, things like that. If you just step into it, you're like, well, my family hasn't made a profit, barely made enough for us to live on for the last 30 years. And now I'm supposed to step in here. I don't have any capital because everything's mortgaged to the hilt or, everything's at zero every year. How do you change that? You don't have any investment capital. You don't have any way to work yourself out of that. Changing your whole system means you basically have to go with no income for a couple of years. That's really difficult to do when you're just handed, here you go, this is what we've done. Okay, let's go to another question. Hang on, there's some smoke in the air, so I'm having trouble with allergies, but all right. let me look at this. Some JJ777. Let's look at that. I showed one of my friends your video about price controls and corruption, and I said I still couldn't convince him that if it was more profitable, aka less stressful and easier, more people would farm. I feel like you're not, that is so true. People don't understand it because they haven't done it. So when I was managing the horse leasing company, right? I was for 20 years. The most stressful thing I've ever done by far, because you're barely making it. I mean, here's the thing about ranching that people don't understand. You're ranching or even the horse leasing business. Hang on just a second, sorry. You're getting a check like once a year, right? In horse leasing, we're getting a check twice a year. That's it. So you're running in the red. Even if you're running in the black, here's how you're running. Okay. You're starting at X amount of dollars. Let's say you're at $20,000. If you're self-funding and you're profitable, here's how it works. You got $20,000 in the bank, right? You get this great big whopping check for all your calves, right? So at the end, in the fall, you're like, woo, $1 million in the bank. And you're like, holy cow, we should just invest everything. But you can't, because you have an entire year that you have to survive, that you have no idea what, if anything's going to go wrong, if it's going to rain, if all your fence is going to need replaced all of a sudden because a forest fire burns it down, if something major happens in the world of politics that screws up the market and you can't sell your beef on time, if you get pneumonia in your calves and you're going to lose 30% of your calves, if you're going to have a horrible winter when you're calving, I mean, the list goes on. So when you see that money in the bank, that's not what you think. You don't think, woohoo, we have it made. And now I'm going to do two scenarios here. This is the person that's living on cash, because there's 99% of them are the other way. So let's do it this way. So you go out throughout the year, and you're like, the next week, the tractor breaks down and it costs you $15,000 to fix it, right? Then the next week, you're like, well, the wheels just fell off the horse trailer, so we're going to have to actually either replace both axles or fix that. Then you pay for your feed. So you're like, okay, now I need to buy a bunch of feed. Now, this is where location comes in majorly into play. If you're in Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, all those places, your feed costs, which is the biggest cost there absolutely is in consideration to making a profit, is your feed cost per cow. Yeah, they're going to be way higher the further north you go, because winter takes longer and you have no idea when it's going to start or when it's going to end. You can read the Farmer's Almanac all you want. It doesn't matter. You can have, man, there's going to be an open winter and it's 30 below and 3 feet of snow for the whole thing. You just flat don't know. So that cost is way higher. So there, you watch it go down. Now you just put, $200,000 into hay or whatever it is that you put into hay. Pretty soon, by the summer, you're going, okay, I have $150,000 left and I got to make it all the way to October. And I got fuel to put up hay. I gotta pay for, we probably should replace this tractor because it's about ready to go. You're going, the fencing cost just went up enormously. I got to fertilize this field. You want to know a cost fertilizing a field anymore? In the last 5 years, it's gone up like 300%. You're like $60,000 in just in fertilizer for a smaller place. It's enormous cost. So when you're looking at that, by the time you get back, you're at 20,000 or less by the time you sell your next calves. So you're never thinking, once you've gone through that cycle a few times, you're never thinking, yes, I got this huge, well, sometimes you are. You're thinking, wow, that was a pretty good year. I think right now, the ranchers are thinking that a lot because cattle prices are quite a bit higher than they have been until they get through the expenses of the year, which have doubled over the last 5 years. Have gone up an enormous amount. I'm like, I don't think you guys realize you need to the cattle prices have to be where they are for you to break even now or make a profit. But if anything happens to those cattle prices, you can no longer make it through the next year on the price that you had. So beware. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, beware. Don't go spending all that money on something that you can't afford, because this is how most ranches, especially ranches that have been in the family for years and years and years, because they went through the 80s where they lost a huge amount of capital. And they went through, you know, several other periods when the price was being manipulated and the cattle prices were way, way down. I think they're being manipulated now. But anyway, this is how most of them generational ranches run. They don't start at 20,000. They start at 10,000 after they have gotten paid for all of their cattle for that year. After they got their huge $1 million check or $500,000 check, they're at 10,000 above in their bank account. Then they go to their banker and they get their new line of credit, and they find out what their interest rate is going to be for that next year. And that's where they start the year. And I'm not kidding you. This is where most of them are. You want to talk about stress. You don't know exactly what those expenses are going to be. And you have to start at $10,000 in the black and get a $650,000 line of credit for the year. And then you start spending $10,000 doesn't last you a month, because you've usually got expenses that you just held on to because you know you're going to get paid for your calves. Sorry. Excuse me. So you've kind of held on to them. So that next week, bang, you're in the red. And through that whole year, you're just watching that thing go down. Boom, boom. This is what I did. Until the end of the year, you're like, man, I hope I get paid. I hope that dang check comes through. I hope the calf prices don't go down 10 cents a pound, because if they do, I'm not even going to get it back to zero. You're $650,000 in the hole by the time you get to payday again. And you get $680,000 for your calves. You're going, whew, man, I'll tell you what, that was another year down the tube. I mean, I am so happy, and you're like, feel elated that you're above zero again. Now you're above zero 30 grand. That's how most people do it. And some years, it flat don't get to zero. When that check comes in, you're like, okay, I'm still 30,000 in the hole. And I got to go talk my banker into giving me another line of credit so I don't even go there. And you're like, wow, these guys are rich. Yes, they are. They have land. And the only way they make that credit work is they have to start mortgaging that land. So you get further and further in the hole. Every year, you got more loans on something to get by for the next year. That's a sad predicament. And because that's why I recommend trying to figure out how to make money be at the end of the cycle, meaning from meat to customer, because that's where the money is made. The money is made in packing, not really packing. The money is made by the packers, because they're the ones that buy this thing, the cow that's already there. It's already ready to butcher. They only own it for 24 hours, 48 hours, 36 hours. They run it through a mega processing plant, put it in Walmart or Kroger's, and it's gone in 3 weeks. The rancher's had it for a year, right? And then the backgrounder that's had it for 6 months, and the feedlot that's had it for 120 days, their profit is almost nothing. And if anything changes at the top, they're starting that year at zero, and have to go talk to their banker again about increasing their line of credit. This is how it works. So it's I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but I just want to explain that to you. All right. Somebody's watching from Algeria. All right. I gotta try to clear myself out here. I'll be right back. apologize for that. It is spring, and the Forest Service is doing a controlled burn. So we're in the spring. So since we don't get to breathe smoke most of the year, might as well get us to breathe it now, right? Yeah, Shirley said, we also shopped at Goodwill. Where we get all of our clothes. I don't. I have to buy. So I get, and like I said, I'm not in the same situation now. My money doesn't come from there, and that's why I left that industry. I was like, I can't even make a house payment. If I was so tight that, I mean, as a young, I got married at 18, and through those first 10 years, I mean, my word, if you got a flat tire, you had to fix a vehicle. You were like, where is that money going to come from? $40. Where is that? I don't have $40. I mean, that's how tight it was. And so I started building the house and selling that house. I never did any development. And housing is where money is made. That is sad to me. I made more money in those years than anything else. And believe me, if I just wanted to make money, that's what I would be doing. I wouldn't be doing this. Wouldn't be making videos. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So here's something we should discuss. Okay. Before we get on to the next question, which is number 3, we're gonna get to Marge here. She says their ranch is paid for, no debt on anything. Now we have wolves killing our profit, looking to leaving Lake County, Oregon. Where to go from there? So but go where? Exactly. This is the conundrum. Now, in the West, there is a huge push, and there has been for many years now, to put wolves everywhere. It's like the predator thing has gone out of control. It's like, do you guys understand what predators do? And I think a lot of it's being sold because you have Disneyfied wolves, it's cute, cuddly little things. And then everywhere on Instagram is somebody sleeping next to a wolf, or petting a wolf or something stupid like that, trying to make these things look completely different than they are. And I'm sorry, I'm being harsh on them because they are harsh. Wolves are not cute, cuddly creatures. They kill for fun. And this is not, I'm not throwing this out there like I'm a rancher, so I don't like wolves. So I'm going to say they kill for fun. They don't care. They just kill. That's what they do in their pastime. And I'm sorry, but they kill in a way that is, I think humans are 100 times better at managing wildlife herds than wolves, because wolves don't stop. For some reason, there's this thing of wolves will just, manage their own numbers, bull honky. So they don't do that. They'll just kill everything until everything is gone. They've proven that because they've had islands where it was just wolves and moose or something like that. And you have one thing offset that ecosystem a little bit, and they just wipe out all of the moose. And then the wolves all die because they all starve to death. So anyway, so somebody more like question, somebody said, why do you have different chaps on your wall behind you? Well, so I have a few different chaps that I wear, and then this set right here, this, I don't know if you see this, that's my dad's brand on them. This is a set of shotgun chaps that my dad had made when he was a teenager, and they're very cool. So I like having these here. I can't really wear them because they're a little bit too short for me, but they used to have a little extra on the bottom, but he took it off because they were a little bit too long for him, and he kept stepping on it. Now, there's so many pictures of my dad wearing these. He wore these for a long, long time. And then this is my chinks. So these are my short chaps right here, and they come off the wall, and I wear these when it's warmer. So when it's warmer, this is what I wear. This set I had made, and the chap maker just, I don't know why. The leather he picked, it just is it's too flimsy, so I don't wear them. And then this is bat wing. So I bought these. These are bat wing. So bat wing chaps, they only attach right up here. So if you see a rodeo cowboy, they're wearing these. Or some old cowboys in the old West, they just go around your thigh, and then they kind of flap down at the bottom. It's just loose. And those I wore for a long time, but they do get in your way because they're flapping. So, you know, they'll get stuck behind a stirrup. You can't walk around in them that well because you can step on the ends of them. And then I'll show you a set of chaps. Hang on just a second. If you guys can indulge me for just a minute, I have to run out to my pickup to get my other set of chaps. So I'll show you those. And then we'll get back to the ranching discussion. All right, so these are my chaps that I had made. Now you notice that there's some similarities here. You notice that? There's a few similarities. I had these made off of this old design of my dad. So this is kind of like a new version of my dad's old chaps. So I had the conchos with this straight line. This is unique. These were handmade by somebody in Conrad, somewhere up by Conrad, way back in the 70s. So this straight line is usually not here. The fringe is usually part of this. So it's just one thing. But for some reason, whoever made these had the fringe separate, and it's got this concho and then a straight line. So I had these made to kind of replicate what my dad looked like. And then where he had his brand, I put my logo. So so that's something that possibly I will be able to hand down to my kids. One of my kids. I have two sons, so that's going to be a little more difficult than just one son, but all right, let's get back to something else here. Okay. Somebody said the one that makes the money in the livestock industry is the butcher. They're busy 24/7. I would say there's another person that makes money in the livestock industry, and that's the retailer. So we forget about the retailer because the person that is more directly associated with ranching is the packers, because that's all they do. Packers are the companies that buy from, this is where it gets tricky. They buy the beef ready to butcher from the feedlot, right? They butcher it, and then they sell it to the retailer. Now, this is supposed to be free market, so they're supposed to make a deal with the feedlot, and the feedlot's supposed to make money out of that, and they're supposed to compete. There's supposed to be competition here, but there isn't. That's why we mostly focus on the packers being the bad guy, because the packers are a bad guy. They're so big, and they're just making profit. They don't care. We're just the feedlots included. The feedlots are also somebody that is a price to be reduced, meaning to the packer, it's like, I can't push up anymore. So they used to be able to really dictate. The packers were big enough they could dictate to the retailer. The retailers are, Kroger's, Walmart, big, grocery stores, right? That buy the meat and then sell it to the customer. The packers used to be big enough to where they could say, hey, we're going to charge you more, Walmart more, you know, to sell you meat. Now they can't. Walmart's big enough. They can dictate the price that they're going to pay to the packer, way more than the packer can. So because of that, the packers can't really push upward much more. So they push downward. Okay, so they can push downward, meaning they can dictate the price they're going to sell to the feedlot. Now, so I've done a video with Mike Calicrate, and I didn't really know if I believed how they were doing this, but this is how they were doing it. They would just decided to cooperate. There's only a few companies that do it. So they're like, why are we competing with each other? There's only 4 of us. So why don't you take this area and I'll take that area? And then they just tell the feedlot what they're going to pay. They're like, I'm only going to pay you this much. And if you don't take it, then you're just going to sit there with all your cattle. So because of all that, we view the packer as the main problem. But really the retailers are so big and so global that they actually are dictating just as much as the packers now. In fact, Walmart is starting to try to go completely cut out the packer altogether and start their own supply chain of packing so that they can control from the rancher to their store to the customer. The more you can control of that supply chain, the more you can dictate the price at both ends, right? That is not ever going to be good for the rancher, ever. And it won't be good for the customer either. Down in Kansas, the meat department at Walmart went up like 20%. The price of meat went up 20% as soon as the local grocery store went out of business. So what happens when you eliminate competition is you eliminate competition. That means that local store went out of business because Walmart was able to drop the price enough, keep the price low, to where that other store couldn't compete. Well, everybody went and bought the cheap meat, right? Oh, I'll buy the cheap meat. Of course we do. We're Americans. We shop. So when they did that, once they go out of business, then immediately up the price. Boom. Because there's no competition. Who's going to say they can't up the price? They've driven everybody out of business, which is why I say that the price is being manipulated now. Even though cattle are really high, I believe they're partly high right now because they're driving small packing plants out of business. If they pay more for the cattle right now, because right before COVID or right after COVID, this is my opinion, so take it or leave it. There was a ton of grant money put up by the USDA for small packing plants to create competition in the market with the big packing plants. Millions of dollars. So they put all these grants came up for bid, and there was a whole bunch of small packing companies that came on the scenes. Are like, well, yeah, we'll start a packer and we're gonna slaughter 1,000 head a week and make these big the big 4 packing plants have some competition. No, you're not. Number one, you can't break into the seller market on the end. So you better have a retailer before you even start business. That's my mind. If you can't retail it, if you can't retail to somebody, it doesn't matter how many you slaughter. You don't have anywhere to go with it. So retail is a bigger player than we give it credit for. There is no outlet for your beef. You don't have a business. So these small packers have a huge problem right there. Then the big packers start paying more for cattle. Well, now what? Now the small packer has to pay more for the cattle that he's got coming in. He doesn't have the profit margin. So these big packers are doing 4,000 or 5,000 cattle a day through one packing plant. They can make $40 per cow and still make a profit. A small plant that's doing 20 to 30 a week or 100 a week has to make way more profit than that, or they can't even pay for their rent, right? And when you have a USDA slaughtering plant, you have to have a full-time inspector on site. Well, that's not a little cost if you can find one, because there's a shortage of those. So somebody who's doing 4,000 cattle a day, I don't know how many they have to have on site, but they can spread those costs over an enormous amount of cattle. That's not the whole story, because there's more to that story. A small packing plant can't break into the hide market either, because the hide markets get all their hides from the big four. So as soon as they try to make a deal, and I've heard these, I've interviewed people that this happened to. As soon as they try to make a deal with a smaller guy, well, the packing plant just says, well, if you buy from him, you can't get any of mine. So you can't break into that market either. So what I'm saying is, the reason I told you that is a packing plant. So the packing plants I'm talking about are Cargill, Marfrig, which is National Beef, and Tyson and JBS. Those are the big four. Okay. And so how do you compete with them? They can drive the price up to where they only make $10 a head, right? Because they're still making a whole bunch of money on the hide and the hooves and all that stuff that they make makeup out of, and, leather seats and all that. So they can make $10 a head and still make a whole pile of profit. Whereas a small company they don't have any extra for their drop. They don't get anything for that. The drop is the extra stuff, right? Value added stuff. So they have to make an enormous amount of profit per head on what they're selling. So now if you force them to pay more for their beef, they don't hardly have an outlet on the other end anyway. Now they're going to charge a whole bunch at retail prices. It means they're not competitive with the retailers. Do you see any problems here? You see how this works? They don't have to come right at you. When you're that big, global corporations don't have to come at you and say, I'm going to compete with this guy. All they have to do is price you out of the business. It just takes a few years. They don't care. They're making profit. They can show a loss on their books of 60 million per quarter. It doesn't matter. They still paid their executives all, 40 million for that year. It's not like they're losing money. Go look at the books. I've done it. Oh, we lost 60 million this year. And what did you pay your executives? Because everybody on that board got millions of dollars. So where'd that come from if you lost 60 million? During COVID, they made billions. I mean, all of a sudden their profits jumped from 100 million to 1.4 billion dollars. Well, I mean, now they can sit there for a couple years on that profit. So these are the issues. So I got into that rant because somebody was mentioning that packers are the ones who are making all the money, or the butchers. They're calling, I assume what they're saying, butcher is the one who's the packer, because that's what they are, basically. So it's not as simple as that. I think the retailers have gotten so big now, the packers aren't the only problem. It's both of those. Any small packer has a huge hurdle. They have to they have to find some way to compete, which they can't do on just price. And they have to find a retail outlet, which you can't break into with the amount of meat that they're producing. So, because Walmart's not going to buy from you. They're not going to buy from this company over here that's doing 100 head a week when they can buy 4,000 head, every 2 days from the big packer at a lower price. Now, where's that meat coming from? Man, we could get into a lot of stuff. I don't know if I should. So let's try to get back to what we're doing this thing on. Okay. All right. Let me get a sip of coffee, and then we'll go back into these questions. Okay. All right. Next question. What animals are typically raised on U.S. ranches? This is very interesting. So most U.S. ranches raise beef. We're a huge beef industry country. At least that's what we think. Now, we raise a ton of chickens and a ton of hogs as well. But just keep this in mind, okay? When you go down to the grocery store and you buy Smithfield pork, which I think they control 24 or 25% of the market now, that's entirely owned by China. The hog industry is only 6,000 people anymore. There used to be hog farmers everywhere, but they've driven them all out of business. That's why I say you can make a lot of money in hogs, but you have to sell the meat directly to the customer. You have to cut out the middlemen who are taking all the profit, which is now China in a lot of cases. So, but so it's really hard. What do we raise here mostly is beef, because the other markets have been controlled by global companies. It's just the way it is. The one thing I don't really understand is sheep. Now, I've eaten sheep, eaten lamb, way more this year than I ever, well, I don't even know how to say that because it's not even, I've eaten sheep like, 14 times this year. I have never eaten sheep before that. I think I ate sheep one time as a teenager, or lamb or something. We just don't eat that much sheep in America. Why? I always kind of wondered that. Why don't we? Right now we import almost all of our sheep. Like, I can't remember. It's like 80 or 90% and that we do have in the United States from Australia. So they're raising tons of sheep. Just think about the numbers here. In Montana, in like 1920, we had 6 million sheep just in the state of Montana. And now, today, we have less than about 6 million in the entire country. So what happened? So one of the things that I think happened, now somebody told me this and I thought it was kind of interesting. I was wondering, why don't we eat much sheep anymore? It's a good meat. They don't eat hardly anything. Sheep are very easy to care. Well, they're easy to care for but they're also easy to kill by anything. So any predator can take out, half of your half of your herd very quickly. As 406 Regen knows, right, Matt? It's tough. It's predators are tough on sheep. Anyway, back to this. Somebody was telling me that in World War II, what most of the people that were in World War II got to eat from their army rations was canned mutton. So if you can imagine the sights and the smells that you're experiencing, and mutton is older sheep, so it's not the best tasting meat most of the time anyway. But if what you're associating with that meat is the sights and smells of World War II, sitting in a foxhole, blood and guts and mud and fear and never knowing if you're going to go home kind of thing, and you're associating that with canned mutton, you're probably not going to eat sheep for the rest of your life, okay? If you can help it. That's a whole generation. Now, that generation is pretty much gone now, so I don't think that association is there now, but we've gotten rid of all of our sheep, if that's really why we did that. With pork and chicken and pork have just been completely taken over by global corporations. So we raise all those things, but now what's coming back around here is some raising some buffalo. It's an interesting business. I've done a couple videos with Ty Stubblefield over here in Montana. Very interesting to deal with buffalo. They're not like cattle. I mean, you don't just walk out there and grab a calf and tag it. That's not what you do. They're a lot more wild, right? It's interesting. It's a very lean meat. It's very healthy meat. Harder to raise in one way because you have to have way better fences. You got to use electricity. You don't want them to mix with anything. Once they get out, how do you get them back in? That's with cows, you can jump on a horse and wrangle your bull back into the corral. But with a buffalo, I don't know. I don't know what you do. You just don't let them get out, I guess. You don't want to have the power go out on your electric fence. So we also we used to raise elk, but they kind of made that illegal. So they didn't really make it illegal. They just made it impossible for you to do that. All right. Let's go on to the next question on my list. And if you have another question, leave it in here. We're going to go back to this in just a minute. Here meaning the chat. Let's see. What are the biggest challenges facing ranchers today? That's a hard one. So it feels like, honestly, if you're in the ranching world, it feels like the whole world is against you right now. The environmental groups are trying to put you out of business through litigation. The environmental groups are also trying to put you out of business by releasing 9 billion predators that actually eat your livestock. And so there's a misconception here that they say, oh, all these ranchers are whining, but they get paid for their livestock. No, they don't. The process, so there's a couple reasons why they don't. Number one, you have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt what animal it was that killed your animal or your livestock. So You got cow, and these are not backyard things. The whole West is, even if you have them in your back pasture, you may not be able to prove it. But the whole summer, they're up in the high country. They're out in pasture. They're in thousands and thousands of acres. And the reason for that is in the West, we're going to cover this right now. I don't know if it's the right place or not. How many acres per cow do you need? That depends on where you live. Because in the West, you have a short growing season. You got mostly desert conditions and a lot of winter. So you have the average per cow in Montana is 40 acres per cow. That means for every cow that you have, you need 40 acres. That's for grazing in the summertime. You still have to feed the thing in the winter. It's not like they can go out and dig through the snow very, very well. I've heard they can on like grain fields and stuff. I don't know anybody that does that. Typically, you have to feed hay once it gets hard, and you don't want them to lose a calf. So you better feed them up. Now, this is the reason why Montana is a hard place to start ranching, because if you're in, let's say, Texas or Oklahoma or Tennessee, where I was in Texas, East Texas, I did those series of videos. They have one cow for every 5 acres. Can you imagine what that does to your profit when you have one cow for 5 acres versus one cow for 40 acres? So it's like Tennessee and some in Alabama, you can have one cow per acre. That's huge, huge difference in profitability. And so out here, the reason I tell you that is out here, one cow for 40 acres means you can hardly find the things, right? If you're just walking out your door, you're not going to see them. You don't find a wolf kill, for a week because it's back drug into a draw or behind a bush or something. And then it's scattered. It's just a bunch of bones scattered all over the place. They don't leave it. They eat the thing. And even if wolves don't eat it, bears will find the kill, because wolves will kill stuff and just leave it. Bears follow wolves around sometimes up here, and they'll just eat it. Now, when a bear eats something, he scatters the bones. He makes a mess. How would you ever come to that and go, yep, this was a wolf kill? You have no idea. So you can't prove it in the first place. You can't even prove that it died by a predator at that point. So if you can prove that it was a predator, then you have this process you got to go through to get paid. And sometimes ranchers don't even do it just because they're not paperwork people. They're out ranching. So I don't even know. They're like, is it even worth the $1,200 that I would get after a year of paperwork? I don't know. You see that in Colorado right now because they released all those wolves down there. And there's been a lot of predation on livestock by those wolves. Very few have ever gone through the process to try to get paid because it's such a complicated process. They made it so ridiculously complicated down there. They didn't even bother. It's like, it's not even worth my time to go through the process to maybe get paid. Up here in Montana, and when they first introduced wolves, it was a big deal. Yeah, we're going to fund this thing. And then they just quit that. So we barely have any funding to actually pay for any livestock. We run out of it pretty often. What was the question in the first place? I don't. Challenges. So that's one challenge. I think I covered the challenges pretty well about the financial aspects. There's a lot of challenges. You don't know. You're usually running the hole all year, and you don't know what the weather's going to be. You don't know what the price is going to be. You don't know any of this stuff. So this is a pretty in-depth live stream. I've covered so many different aspects of it. I'm going to leave it there. Okay, how profitable is ranching? Let's touch on this. That really depends. It really depends. Okay, if you're talking about Montana, very hard to make a profit because you have so much winter. So you better be raising your own hay, because if hay is a shortage, like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, wherever it was, all of a sudden hay went up to $400 a ton. Well, heck, if you had to buy that, you're immediately you're down. I don't know, 2x your profit. I mean, your cost just went up 400%. There's no way you could make a profit on that. So, which means you have to kind of be a farmer at the same time. You have to put up your hay, which is cost. It's all a cost. You got fertilizer, you got equipment, you got everything. You're relying on the weather. If you get hailed out, there's a crop down the drain. So all this stuff is very difficult. These are all issues. If you're further south, like I was saying in Texas, I don't understand why those guys are not more profitable, because they don't have the winter to deal with. I mean, they can put up a little hay and they may have to feed some hay here and there if they have a winter, but it's nothing like, 6 months of pouring $300 hay to your cows. I mean, I don't know how. I did a video with the guy who managed a massive ranch, and we're massive. The place sold for $200 million. This guy knew how to make money per cow. And he said the one thing you have to do is take your feed cost as your number one priority and get it down. He said people try to manipulate these numbers of all these other costs, labor and, vaccines, trying to get those cheaper and trying to get everything cheaper. And he said they forget the one cost that's actually 100 times more important than those, and that's feed. If you can get your feed cost down, the more you get that down, the more you actually make. So here's how you focus on that. And then some, like somebody mentioned, you have drought, right? Drought comes in. Sometimes a drought will last 5 years. This is a natural cycle. They always, global warming, climate change. Climate change is a great term because it can apply to absolutely any change in the weather. So if it gets too wet, something's on fire because you've mismanaged your entire forest for 25, 40 years. You get a drought, which would be normal any other time, but now it's all climate change. You can say climate change for any reason, but droughts have a massive impact on ranching. With a ranch that you could run 300 cows for the next 5 years, you can only run 300 or 200 cows because of drought. You don't know that. All of a sudden it hits. So you better manage your herd wisely, because if you are always at capacity and the drought hits, bang, with the amount of money that they make, it's not that much. So profit at the end, you can't really, they always kind of want to push that line of capacity. But then when a drought hits, you're selling half your herd at the same time that the price drops, because everybody's selling half their herd. So those are all concerns. So I've covered a lot of the retail and packer concerns and all that. If you have any more of those things specifically that you want to hear answered, make sure you put them in there. Okay, let's go on. What is a dude ranch and how does it work? So a dude ranch is not actually a cattle ranch. It's a vacation spot. So a lot of ranches have actually done this throughout the years to become a dude ranch, where people pay to come out and they give them rides and they move some cattle around. That's fantastic. Just keep in mind that when you're doing one of those for a week, that is not reality. Okay. That is somebody creating an environment where you can enjoy a vacation and have part of the ranching lifestyle. You're not experiencing the financial stress. You're not experiencing the day-to-day, this broke, everything is going to crap today, that kind of thing. That part you don't get. And the everyday, all day, work hard for the rest of your life kind of a thing, you don't get that either. So just keep that in mind when you're doing that. Dude, that's what a dude ranch is. Way different than a working cattle ranch. They make their money. Typically, a dude ranch makes their money from people paying to come out there, not from the cattle themselves. Or it's an addition. They're making extra money because they can't make enough on the cattle themselves. How do ranchers manage land and environmental concerns? Well, some don't, some do. So this is a big difference. Okay, this is environmental concerns are, and I touched on this earlier, but I would say that small farm and ranches, especially ranches, deal with environmental concerns enormously different than a corporation. So when you see a really bad farmer or rancher, typically it's been a generational ranch. And I say that not as a total negative, but sometimes you get complacent. You've just had it handed to you, so you're like, well, we'll just do it the same way. And you don't take into consideration the changes in politics, the changes in the the way that everything is sold, the changes in who has control. What now the retailers and the packers have complete control of the industry, which means you don't have any control. That kind of thing. It's kind of limited, and it can lead to bad practices. But most of the time, the bad practices come from large corporations. The reason is it's all about profit. So they're not living day to day seeing this drought and understand that this ranch that once could hold 300 now for the next 3 years can only hold 150 cows. They don't see that. They're like, why are we cutting down from 300 to 150? That's ridiculous. That's way less profit. Put them out there. And you're just running that ground into the dirt. You're when you are, the more removed you are from a situation, the easier it is to make decisions that are very detrimental to the environment. People think, for some reason, they think small-time farmers and ranchers are worse on the environment. I just came from California, where in the Cuyama Valley, every single person, including the school in that valley, is getting sued for their water by massive corporations, farming corporations. Why? I don't know, but probably because they don't care. They just want to use as much water as they can. They already have the lawyers on hand. So they figure as long as we keep it in court, we can use as much water as we can. We can produce carrots and keep on going. So people sitting in a boardroom that are very far removed from what they're doing, from where the interactions with the ground are, these interactions between man and the ground, the further you get removed from that, the easier it is to destroy the environment, because it's all about profit then. If you're sitting in a boardroom, I've said it a bunch of times, you're sitting in a boardroom, sitting around a table, making decisions, it's about profit. If you're out there on the land and you know that you want to hand this to your child, are you going to run the thing into the ground on purpose? No. You're going to make different decisions because you're thinking long term. You want to keep that ranch looking like it did. Do the best you can to make it do that anyway. You want to keep it profitable. If you totally overgraze that thing, you know for the next 3 years, you're hammered. So you're going to cut down the grazing. You're going to sell a few cows. You're going to make sure that you learn how to manage that thing a little better and run your cows in a different way, because you ain't going to have nothing to hand your kid if you keep going the way you are. That is the difference. That's why one of the major reasons we need small farmers and ranchers instead of global corporations running our farmland. Got on that rant. Okay. We can get into the details of how they do that. Now, one of the things that we always forget, so ranchers get a really bad name in hunting, in the hunting industry, okay? For some reason, this comes from a complete lack of understanding of how wildlife is managed. We raise all of our wildlife and they're all just hiding out on the public land and our private land. Nobody lets us on there or whatever. Do you realize that all year round, that rancher or farmer is feeding that wildlife for you? So a lot of public ground is mountain stuff that doesn't have anything in the wintertime. And they can't even stay up there in the wintertime. They're all out on the private ground in the wintertime. And the rancher is feeding them all year. For them to go back up in the public land, healthy, probably many, many more survive that way than would if the farmer and rancher wasn't out there feeding them. Not on purpose. They don't like to feed them. I mean, they're thinking profit. So they're thinking these 100 head of elk that are sitting there eating my haystack are definitely a detriment, or eating my hayfield. Inadvertently or not, they're doing it. They benefit. This needs to be something that's talked about more and more and more. Farmers and ranchers working hand in hand with hunter groups instead of being enemies. This is two groups that should be friends, and they are not. It's like I can see this as a massive problem because the outside, the environmental groups and everything are just hammering on that. Yeah, hunters, see how bad they are. And the wildlife, I don't know, who's going to manage that land if they don't? It's going to be houses, probably. So, excuse me. What role do cowboys play in ranching? So this is a this is an interesting question because, a lot of us view ranching and ranchers and cowboys is kind of the same thing, but it's not really. I'm a cowboy, not a rancher. Cowboys do, you know, they ride, they move cows, they work cows, all that kind of stuff. They help ranchers. Cowboys are much more often, I associate them, and cowboy is with, you know, more with horses than anything else. So ranchers can do whatever. They can run four-wheelers and everything. They're basically the business of ranching versus being a cowboy. Cowboy is more riding and roping and all that kind of stuff. Cowboy is what people really want to be a lot of times, and they associate it with ranching, but it's sometimes not. Cowboys usually don't make much money. They're usually hired, and in the past they have been hired. A lot of times cowboys will do something like break horses or something because it makes more money than riding for a rancher. All right, let's move on. I'm going to run through these last two, and then we will then I might get to some of those. So the next one, this is a big one. How does public grazing work? So this is a big issue, and I don't think we can cover it here, but I'll just give you an overview. And I was up speaking at something in Kalispell, Montana, and I was talking about how ranchers and hunters and stuff work together. And one of the things I was talking about was public land. So we've done studies with this. We haven't done studies with this. America has done studies. The Smithsonian has one. Now, they like to focus on buffalo, not cattle. Like, they're totally different. You know, we can breed them together and get offspring, but they're a completely different animal, apparently. Just know, if you watch the media or if you look at any studies, buffalo are bad, buffalo are good, cattle are bad. That's what you're going to get, okay? So let's talk about it in reality. In reality, you can substitute the two most of the time. There are differences in their grazing habits, so that is completely different. They're also different in how they're managed. Buffalo move differently than cattle. You can move cattle similar to buffalo, is what I mean, but you have to actually move them in that pattern. They don't naturally move in that pattern, okay? But they're so similar as an animal, and they do the same thing for the land that we just flat don't, as a country, we don't get. Down near Dillon, there's a massive drainage down there. So it's, you know, hundreds of thousands of acres. And the Forest Service, because this big movement now is that all cattle need to come off of public land, right? And we're going to talk about how that works in just a minute, because they get really cheap grazing on public land. So the Forest Service eliminated all those leases. So all the cattle left. All the outfitters who get paid by hunters to go into that ground, half of them probably wanted to get rid of the cattle, right? Because they don't understand what's going on. They're like, yeah, get them stupid cows out of here, you know, they eat all the grass and blah, blah, blah. In about 2 years, the elk left. They just didn't even use that whole drainage, like nothing. Why did that happen? Well, the Smithsonian did a study out in eastern Montana and found that the one thing you can't really do without on ground to keep it healthy is the main large ungulate, which is either cattle. Now, they just use buffalo for that, but you can replace the two, so buffalo or cattle. If you don't have one of those on the land, your land will go stagnant, because all that rough grass, that first grass that comes up, all is kind of stemmy. It becomes big, and it's rough grass. And you can look at this in regenerative grazing. You have that cow or buffalo goes out there and they rip apart and mess up that grass. They don't even eat it all. That's why buffalo move differently. They will go through an area pretty fast. What they did is when they could roam, okay? And they're very heavy animals with sharp hooves, so they poke holes in the ground. They make the ground take in moisture better. They stomp grass into the ground. I was talking about this with Matt from Forest Service Regen. What that does is that grass then becomes matter in the ground that breaks down to create more soil. If you don't have that, what happens is you get these mats of grass that, or old grass that either stand up straight and just let the sun just cook the ground, but it's solid, so it doesn't take in moisture very well. You don't disturb it to germinate the grass seeds. All of these things happen, and pretty soon the elk don't like it. They do not like that old grass. They want the cows to come through and eat that, so that these new younger shoots, even if they turn brown later, they're totally different texture. They're different. They have different nutrients, so they like that stuff. So if you want to go hunting, go where you think, oh man, this is grazed to the dirt in the mountains by cattle, and that's where the elk want to be. I don't know why. That's just the way it is. I didn't make the thing, okay? Don't get mad at me. You remove the cattle from that area, the elk stop using it. Pretty soon, the birds stop using it. This is what they found out in eastern Montana. The birds even stop using it because it becomes stagnant. The ground starts to become stagnant. You start actually building up things in the soil. Matt, help me out here if you're still on there. What does it build up in the soil? Can't remember. Anyway, it starts becoming stagnant and starts hurting the ground to where nothing wants to live there as far as wild animals. So that is a benefit of having cattle on public ground. Not just a benefit. I believe it's essential for us to have on public ground. Now, why do people always get upset with having cows on public ground? Well, because they get this super deal. You know, they pay $15 a head per month or something for, depends on the area, for that lease. Now that sounds really cheap, and it is. It's pretty cheap. Some of it's even cheaper. BLM is cheaper, but without that, so that's why hunters have a bad, you know, it's like, or recreationalists, you know, I don't want to step in a cow patty. What did they think was, when they had 60 million buffalo running around, what did they think looked like? These are the arguments that you get with this. I'm gonna just explain this to you first. So a lot of the ranchers out west would never make it without public ground because, like I said, they have to have 40 acres per cow. So if you have to buy 40 acres for every cow, you're not going to make money. So they do it with like a ranch that's 2,000 acres and they have 10,000 acres or 5,000 acres of public ground leased. Now, and it's cheap, but it costs them a lot because they have to move those cattle a lot. There's a lot of rules on public ground. You can't just kick them out there and go, yep, wherever they show up, they show up. No, you have to keep them out of the bot. You got to keep them out of any creek, which I'll talk about in a second. You got to keep them out of any riparian area. You got to move them. You can only eat like 50% of the grass or 30% of the grass. I can't remember what it is. It's and you have to, you know, walk around and do tests to see how much they've eaten. You got to move them every so often. I mean, it takes, you better be paying attention where those things are. Hang on just a second. I'm sorry. So those costs really add up. Costs of fuel, costs of, you know, more, lots of costs. Somebody says GPS ear tag. They're trying those in a lot of areas. They're actually good for finding your cattle. It doesn't really help you as far as, so if you need to, like, oh crap, there's 4 of them missing, you can kind of find them. The only ones they have, GPS ear tags don't like send out a signal. So it's, you gotta have a battery that lasts a long time. Anyway, when you understand how remote these areas are, and you kind of figure some of that stuff isn't going to be feasible. Anyway, so that's why farmers and ranchers do it, is because they have to have that ground, that cheaper ground, to run enough cows to make a living on, okay? What people don't realize most of the time is they're doing a massive benefit to these things. Now, this thing about keeping cows out of a riparian area, keep them out of the creeks because they're causing erosion on the creek banks. Number one, have you ever seen, which I haven't, I'm just saying, just imagine for a second, 100,000 buffalo running through a creek. when you read about the buffalo hunters of the West, they talk about swaths of ground that had not a blade of grass on it. They looked like fallowed fields, a mile wide, where a buffalo herd had gone through. And we're really concerned with those 100 cows standing on a creek bank. Go watch my videos on the Rocky Mountain front, because that is incredible. Where the cows were, next to the creeks, it's like grass falling into the creek. The banks are, I mean, yeah, they cut a trail here, they wear this bank away, and people just, I mean, I'm not kidding you. Environmental groups sue all the flipping time about this. 1 year, you get a super heavy runoff, and it washed the entire creek bank 150 feet wide down to River Rock for 15 miles. Nothing, just wiped out the whole thing. And they're worried about cattle standing on the bank. You can see how ridiculous this gets. I was down doing sheep, moving sheep, and the guy was like, "Oh, don't show that because, you know, they're standing on the sheep, the creek bank," and the fishermen get all upset because I'm like, the runoff in the spring does 1,000 times more damage to a creek bank than sheep or cattle would if you let them stand on the flipping bank all year. The reality does not fit what these people think. It doesn't. Just, it's not practical. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous propaganda, and we don't teach the right things in our schools. Sorry, they just don't. It's all. I was watching the Octo something about this lady who had a bunch of kids from somebody who gave her a sperm donor or something. I wasn't watching it. My wife was watching it. I walked into the house, and they were talking to one of the cameraman was talking to one of the kids, and she was like, "So why are you vegan?" Well, my mother taught me, you know, the reality of how bad animals are for the environment and, you know, all this stuff. And I'm like, this is what they're learning in school. This is why we have these issues. They believe that animals are bad for the environment. Can you imagine this? They're the worst thing for the environment. Animals. Like animals. Anyway. Sorry. Apologize for that. Let's move on to the last question, and then I'm going to look for. I'm running out of voice here, guys. Let's move on to the last question, and we're going to get to a few of your things, and then we'll wrap up. So, what's the future of ranching in the United States? I think the future of ranching is essential to our survival, to the health, the environmental health of our land, and the economic health of our land. This is why. All the reasons I've just stated mean that we have to have either buffalo or cattle on our land, our public land, or any of our land to keep it healthy. That is essential. That's not something like, oh, we need to discuss why these ranchers are making so much money off of public land. Oh, I hate seeing cattle and sheep on public land. And for those that want to say, well, let's just turn buffalo back out there again. You guys don't even like to step in a cow patty. You imagine buffalo out there all the time? And some places just flat don't work. Just flat don't work for turning buffalo back out. We do not live in a world that is the same as 250 years ago. We don't live there. So we have civilizations. We have fences. We have parks. We have things where you can't just allow buffalo to roam wherever they want and tear out fences and everything. Some places would work. I think in certain areas you could do some of that. You can't do it everywhere, okay, without changing society altogether, which we're not going to do. But you know what? There's this other animal. There's this other animal that doesn't mostly, that you can have around people, right, in the mountains, that you can use for food in a supermarket. And it's actually so close to what the original Bison herds did, if managed properly. It's actually so close you can breed them together with buffalo and have offspring. They call them beefalo. There's an animal like that you can have, that's so docile that you can have them right near town, and you can chase them in to a fenced area, and you can have a livestock. There's an animal like that. So why don't we allow those animals to actually do the work that we need to keep our land healthy? I know it's shocking. I am mind-blowing some people right now. The 126 people, there's probably 2 of them that are like, oh my word, I have never heard such crap in my life. Yeah. Think of that, huh? It is essential that way. Economically, it's essential because we need to have our own food supply. We need to have our own food supply. Okay, I'm going to back up. I'm talking about public land, but there's a lot of land that we farm that needs to be put back in cattle. There's land in Kansas that should have never been used for farming because it takes way more water. I know that's a huge one. I can't figure out the math that people are using that livestock takes more. I've literally tried to figure out the math that livestock takes more water than farming. Number one, and farming is important too. I'm not saying that, but on certain land where it's dry and you have to suck up every bit of submoisture from wells and put it on the surface for it to evaporate, and you make every creek and river in the whole country go completely dry, and then you wonder, like Kansas, that needs to be put back to cattle to save that ground. Every time you plow it up, you lose 70% of the moisture out of the ground. Boom, right there, bang. And the carbon, right out of the ground, every time you plow it up. So in an area like that, that doesn't hold moisture very well, that has very little moisture, you're using all the water underneath. You're using the water from the aquifers, you're using every drop, and you're just evaporating it on an area that should be used for cattle. Because grazing actually benefits the land. Go look it up. Go look at the documentaries they've done. It's not Holy Cow. What is that? Matt, what's the documentary that they should go watch? Put that if you can put that in the comments, and I will say it in here. Anyway, that's yeah, not to mention taking farm. Oh man. So I took a trip. I did a series all the way through California, just right in the middle of winter. And I've been wanting to say, we just, solar farms are maybe not the best thing, but, they do produce power, do it on land that nobody cares about down in Arizona and Nevada. But it's easy for me to say that until I go down there. I'm like, this is somebody's land. And you just literally covered it with solar panels, which cook the ground. And then you have to spray to keep the grass from going, and the grass and the bushes and everything growing up around it. I'm like, wow, I did not realize this. The footprint that you make to produce what we need better be smaller than that, unless you can prove to me that solar is that efficient, which it isn't. It's good. It's great for certain things. Why not put it on buildings? Wind, on the other hand, wind generation is crap. It is the ugliest, stupidest thing I have ever heard of. And I wasn't that sold out on it until I've seen what we do with solar. What a we are spending so many of our tax dollars on subsidizing solar, which is just, it's like, wow, what beautiful land you have in the West and incredible ground. Why don't we cover it with these god awful, ugly things that cost us way more money than they actually produce and kill birds too? Wow. Doesn't that sound like a great idea? Oh, it's terrible. Okay, Matt replied, Kiss the Ground. Isn't that a company that does that? Yeah, Kiss the Ground has some. There's 2 of them. So go look those up if you want to see something about how cattle are beneficial to the ground. Okay, so I've gone off on that. Economics if we allow the system to go the way that they wanted it to go, they being the massive corporations and the sold out globalist ideology of make this country into one big park, and I believe that's part of the wolves deal, and then get all of our food from third world countries, guess what? You're just handing the power over to some other country to dictate to you what you can and can't do. We need to keep our food production right here in this country, right here in this country. So I think the future of ranching in the U.S. is bright as long as you understand it and know what it does and why we need it. And it's essential for economic freedom and our future. Now, I will say one thing about tariffs. Let's talk about tariffs for just a minute before I go. For a long time right now, long time to this date, we have been getting screwed by other countries. I love Canada. I think they're awesome people up there. I think the people of Brazil are fantastic, but we can't compete with them. We have regulations here that dictate what we have to pay for wages, how we have to produce the beef, how long they can be on public ground, how often we have to move them. Everything is so much more here, so much more than what they can do in Brazil. We cannot compete with how cheap they can make beef in Brazil. That makes it so that you cannot, and then you wonder why we lose 17,000 ranchers every single year in the United States since 1980. We can't compete worldwide. And right now, so somebody was having a discussion the other day, and I couldn't believe this, but they were like, yeah, back when we did tariffs, before, it really screwed us because we sell hay, and Japan was, Japan stopped buying hay from us because of that. I don't know where they get that story, but this is how tariffs work. They're already charging, tariffs for us to sell hay to them. That is completely opposite of what we're talking about. That is that's not even relevant, When they sell a good to us, we don't hardly charge them any tariffs. Most of the countries we sell to. But when we try to sell products to their countries, they charge an enormous amount of tariffs. Canada does this, and the European Union does this. Why? Because they want their country to produce whatever good it is. They don't want to allow our products into their country for free, because then they can't compete. So we are just allowing ourselves to be screwed over and over and over again by free trade. Free trade apparently in this country means that we need to support every other country at the expense of our small farmers and ranchers and small businesses in America as well. So we have to make it an even playing field. If you want a country that's prosperous, then you need to actually produce things and manufacture things and manufacture your food and your goods. Basically, why do you think people really get excited about homesteading? Self-sufficiency. Why is that good? Self-sufficiency is good on a small scale, but for some reason, as soon as we start talking about the country, then that goes all the way out the window. Oh, we don't want to be self-sufficient. We want global companies to take care of all of our needs, so we're beholden to them. Now, I put that on there at the end, but that is the mindset. To be self-sufficient means that when something happens in the world that's disastrous, it doesn't affect me because I have food, water, heat, and shelter that I produce myself. If you don't have those four things on your own, now they may not be like the best things in the world. You may want, a variety of your diet that you can't get, but that's not what I'm talking about. You can survive. If you shut down all those things and you don't produce any of them and you rely on another country for them, guess what? If anything happens in the world, you think it's going to affect you? Yeah. Look what happened in COVID. All the supply chains shut down because we've completely outsourced everything. Now, certain areas like Montana is still enough self-sufficient that we didn't see it as much, but places that are big cities, wow, did they see it. If we outsource everything for the benefit of the consumer by making it $1 cheaper, hey, I like cheap prices. I don't like paying through the nose for everything. But if we do that if we are all about outsourcing everything to make it cheaper for the consumer in the name of solely, what I mean is solely, then what happens is we end up, anything happens in the world, and guess what? We feel a massive shock, either in a shortage or in a price increase that's 200%, like we saw in COVID. So you have to think a little bit more long term. I did a video down in Sheridan, Wyoming. And Sheridan, Wyoming was basically 40 years ago completely self-sufficient. It didn't matter what happened around the world. They had flour, they had a way to mill, they had a way to take grain, make it into flour, make it into bread. They had a way to take cattle from the surrounding area, butcher it, put it in a grocery store right there, and sell it to the people. They had a way to produce power. They had coal. They had everything they needed right there. Now, almost none of it. Everything goes out and is shipped back in. Now, if anything disrupts that supply chain, guess what? You're not getting it. You don't have a factory, you can't make flour. How do you butcher beef? Nobody knows even how to butcher beef anymore. These are the things you have to think about. And they don't make perfect economical sense short term. Yeah, great. Let's just, make everything cheaper so everybody, well, pretty soon that's great for a little while until you, like, in the situation I talked about in Kansas, as soon as you run everybody out of business, you can just jack the price up to wherever you want it. That doesn't help you. So anyway, that is my thoughts on everything. Okay, now I'm going to run through a few comments, just read a few comments and see if I can answer some of these questions. Yeah, toilet paper. Somebody mentioned toilet paper. Exactly, toilet paper. Let's eggs. We have centralized the chicken industry so much that, and then the government, our government, decided that bird flu is so dangerous, which I don't know that it actually is that dangerous. From what I can tell, it's like pink eye in a human. So is that dangerous? I don't know. But in the name of that, they've killed 200 million chickens over the last 4 years. And then you wonder why egg prices go up? Because you got them all concentrated in just a couple of companies. So there's hundreds of thousands of birds in one spot, and they just wipe out the whole works. That wouldn't have ever even affected us 40 years ago. Everybody had chickens in their backyard. They wouldn't even have cared if you get a shortage of chickens in Missouri. Now we rely on those same little tiny group of farms that produce all the chickens and all the eggs. And if anything happens, you're all feeling it. Okay. All right. Look at. Yeah, tariffs were first, then federal taxes were next. Government got greedy. I think government got greedy, but they also became globally minded. They want to have this global system, and you can't do that without screwing your own people. So let's just say that. Yeah, the 1% at the top gets filthy rich off of us, but that's not how I don't really think that's the best long-term move, because if you crash society, guess who? Everybody takes it in the shorts. Yeah, too much regulation. Regulation is very important. So people think, just throw out all regulations. No. I know people and corporations that would absolutely trash environment without regulations. And regulations are absolutely good. Over-regulation will kill whatever you're trying to protect. So, well, whatever you're trying to protect in theory. Sometimes I think regulations are meant to kill something, even though you say you're trying to protect it. I believe that 90%, this is my belief, 90% of the environmental groups out there are actually money-making machines and could care less about the environment. All they care about is paying their lawyer fees because they're all lawyers. So that's honestly what I believe. And if you look at the numbers, sure makes sense to me. And they're doing it off of our tax dollars. So, all right. What else? What else do we have here? Sorry. So I don't know. I just covered a lot of things that were important to me. I think these are questions that people want to know. I don't think we're doing a very good job in our school systems. We're not doing a good job of educating people and helping people understand these things. So what I find, I used to think that there was so many people out there just totally against everything that I do, but I find that it's not actually true. I find that most people flat out don't know. They understand exactly as much as they learned in school and from the news media, and that's where they're getting the information. And if you just give them just a little bit of reality, they're like, really? Is that how that works? Absolutely. So I have covered so many things. I apologize if I ranted over here and over there and all over the place. I appreciate you staying with me for 2 hours now. 2 hours. Yeah, 2 hours. Holy cow. All right. Well, you get to see the replay of this on YouTube if you want to check it out and cover all the topics that I have covered. Share this with somebody if you want. Make sure so I'm having trouble now trying to figure out ways to monetize what I do. So I'm going to figure it out. I'm figuring it out, I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Anyway, and check out, so another thing I've done is I've created a game. I think people learn, they got to learn through something, right? So I'm creating a game called Cattle Kings at cattlekings.io. Go check it out right now. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more added to that coming up. We're going to add a lot of stuff in there. And we, being me at the moment. But so I'm creating that to help people kind of have an understanding of how the world works. When you play farming and ranching games, I just go, are you kidding me? This is what people aren't going to learn anything from that. In fact, they're going to learn bad things from that. And even though it's a game, they associate that with real life. So let's make something that teaches them the business. What I'm doing is a game basically that teaches you the business of cattle ranching, hopefully in an interesting enough way where you can actually use it. cattlekings.io. All right. More John Wayne list Yellowstone. Yeah. And I think Yellowstone did a really good thing in one way. So Yellowstone brought a lot of attention to the rancher's plight. They may not have done it right. A lot of things, like especially like the brucellosis thing, was so far off of actually the truth. And the pipeline underneath, like they're going to build a pipeline, an oil pipeline, underneath a lake on a it's like that would cost you so much more than going around the lake. But anyway, so if you have problems with the game, make sure you email me at support@lifeinthewest.com, because I'm building it. Sometimes there's a problem that I don't know about, and I don't know. So you gotta email me if you can. That would be a massive help. You might think, oh, we're bugging Trinity about something wrong. No. If I don't know something's wrong with the game, then I don't know what to fix. So if you have a problem, go on there, take a screenshot of exactly what it is, email it to me so I can figure out what it is and fix it. So McDonald's gets, somebody just said, where does McDonald's get all the beef from? As far as I'm aware, McDonald's gets their beef from the big packers. I don't know which ones. They've actually sued the big packers for manipulating the price. I think it's hilarious because from my point of view, McDonald's is one of those massive corporations that created the need or created the situation where the big packers gained as much control as they have. and now they're suing them because they're taking too much of the market share. Okay. Okay. All right. So please do more videos out in the mountains. Oh, yes. And I will. And I have a couple more that I'm going to edit. I've been working my tail off for the last couple weeks. Haven't gotten anything financially done, but I do have a couple videos of riding in the mountains, and I'm going to do more of those this year. I'm going to be looking for some sponsors to help me do that. So if you know of any companies that sponsor, or you want to sponsor a video or something, I have some ideas, some great ideas. I'll be hopefully posting them on my website this week that I will need help with. So yes, the game. So I'm trying to make the game functional on a phone as it is so that I can turn it into an app later, honestly. But really, in my mind, it doesn't do you any good to develop something into an app until you actually figure out what people want to do, how it works, if it works correctly. So I'm doing it this way so I can figure out how to do it correctly and help people understand this stuff, and then move it from there. Because I need to add a lot more functionality. I'm trying to add challenges right now, which is a little more difficult than I thought, but I'm trying to add some challenges and something that keeps people busy in a more constant basis. So that's going to be under development for a while, but at least there's something there now that you can go to. Oh yeah, so Old Salt in Helena, Montana. If you've ever, I don't know how many people are around there, but fantastic place. Now what they've done is they're trying to be one of those small time packers, but they actually thought about this ahead of time, which most people don't. And they're creating a restaurant. They've already done it. It's done. It's there. They have the Union restaurant, and they have the Old Salt Outpost, which is a burger joint. So they're trying to butcher meat and sell it directly through those businesses, because they're trying. That's the hang up. Doesn't matter how many packers we have, if you don't have any way to sell it to the retailer, you're screwed. So meet Mike Galloway. Beyond the Ranch. All right, I'll write that down. So appreciate it. Anyway, thank you guys for being on here with me. Anyway, so they do a great job, and some of their food is a little fancier at the Union. Do a really good job. They have some amazing chefs there, though. And their burgers are really good as well. And their little potatoes things. Oh, that's so good. All right. Well, I'm going to jump off here. Thanks for being with me today. And hopefully we'll do a few more of these. I don't know if you guys enjoy these live streams where we really go in depth on stuff. It's not like I do a whole bunch of fancy stuff on here, but you know, hopefully it's been interesting. So we will see you guys in the future, and talk to you later. God bless, guys. See you.